As I said, we're going to be studying in the book of Ruth. Appreciate so much the songs and the prayer. As we begin this study, we're reminded of Judges that we just studied and how overall depressing that book was. That's not the end of the story of Judges, thankfully. Whenever we open up the book of Ruth, the very first words we read is in the days of the judges. So this is a story, kind of a side story that takes place in the midst of the period of the judges. And as Roger just pointed out, this is a story about tremendous suffering and tragedy as Ruth and Naomi go through tragic loss at the very beginning of this book. But it ends with God helping them overcome these horrible things that have happened in their lives through wonderful blessings that He gives them. The very first 5 verses of the book of Ruth really set the stage for the whole book. And it tells us all about this tragedy as during the days of Judges, there is a famine in the land. Now, if you study through the Old Testament up until this point, you know from Deuteronomy that God has promised to give famines and pestilence and the sword against His nation whenever they are evil and rebellious. This is His way of dealing with the people and giving them the curses that go along with the covenant. If they don't obey His word, He will give them the curses. And that's very much what we see happening at the very beginning of this, that it's the time of the judges, and there's a famine in the land. God is now judging His people for their rebellion against His law. And this story tells us about a man named Elimelech, who is from the town of Bethlehem. And he decides that in order to escape the famine, he and his family are going to go down to the territory of Moab, which is across the Jordan to the southeast of Israel. The interesting thing here is that Moab is a descendant of Lot, right? This is coming from Lot's ancestries. And what we know from the previous part of the story, back in the book of Numbers, is the Moabites did not help Israel whenever they were crossing over to go into the promised land. And so from Deuteronomy, we find out that God cursed Moab because of their refusal to support Israel, who was a relative, so to speak, to Israel. And He said that not a single Ammonite or Moabite would be allowed to worship God with the Israelites up to the 10th generation. So all of this is really kind of interesting as we see Elimelech take his family and sojourn in the land of Moab, which is the land of a cursed people who do not like the Israelites, who the Israelites do not like. Why would he go there? What is that all about? Well, God, it seems, is intending to kind of remind us of other people who had famines and had to sojourn. You remember Abraham suffered from a famine, and he went to Egypt, and then he went to the Philistia area. Isaac had a famine, and he went to Philistia. And then Jacob also had an odd situation with Esau. Wasn't really a famine, but he ended up going away for a period of sojourn as well. And now we see Elimelech and his family going on a sojourn. And we kind of wonder, is this going to result in them learning something and then coming back and being blessed? Kind of the blessings of Abraham continuing through this family? Well, the first 5 verses tell us that it's not going to go so well this time. These are people who are in a covenant with God. They have received a number of the blessings that were promised to Abraham. And they had been told that they would be cursed if they decided to go and seek out help in foreign countries rather than turning to the Lord. So their response of running away to Moab is not a positive response. And it's not something that should be viewed in a positive way really at all. And as they come into this land, we find out it's not seen as a good idea, because the first thing that seems to happen is the husband of Naomi, Elimelech, the guy who's the head of the family, he dies. And then these 2 sons marry Moabite women. Another thing that was told not to do as an Israelite. You don't marry the women of other countries because you'll start worshiping their gods, and this will lead to all kinds of corruption. Well, the 2 sons of Elimelech and Naomi marry Moabite women. And within 10 years, both of those sons die. And Naomi, at the end of verse 5, is left without any sons or a husband. Instead, all that she has left is 2 daughters-in-law who are Moabites. She's left with nothing. She's a widow without any children. Now, if we know our Bibles very well, we know how God views widows who are left without children. You remember Elijah, we just studied, went to the widow at Zarephath and revived her child, brought her child back to life. Jesus also revives the child of a widow and brings her back to life. God is a big fan of helping widows. So what's going to happen in this story? What's he going to do for this widow? Well, as you go on in the story, you read that in verse 6, Naomi gets word from back in Israel that the Lord has visited Israel and given them food. Now, this is an interesting way of stating this. It's not that the famine had ended, but it is that the Lord visited Israel and gave them food. Notice just the way that's worded. Just gives you the impression that there's an understanding here. If there is food in Israel, it's because the Lord did it. The Lord decided to provide them food. As he had decided to take the food away, now he has decided to give the food back. You see how there's just this little twist in the understanding, maybe of Naomi, that God is the one who is bringing all these things about. He is the one who is in complete control. So she decides to return to her homeland, and so she blesses her daughters-in-law, saying, "May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband." Now, if you've studied Judges, you know rest is a big deal. It's something that happens after the people finally return to the Lord. And now Naomi is wishing for rest to be found by her daughters-in-law. And she wants them to return. And they say, no, we're not going to return. And Naomi gets all upset and she says, "It's just bitter to me that you would come with me and be included in the curses that God has inflicted upon me. I don't want those curses to be on you." It's a bitter thing for her. She doesn't want them to suffer as a result of her own disobedience. And this is the way she talks to her daughters-in-law. But they respond saying, Ophed says, okay, well, she's really weeping, she's upset, but she listens to her mother-in-law, she kisses her, and she leaves and goes back, not wanting to deal with the struggle of finding a man, and she's supposed to maybe marry another son of Naomi, and that the whole thing just really wouldn't work. But Ruth, instead of giving in and saying, okay, yeah, this is a bad idea, things are not going to work out well at all, this is going to result in a lot of suffering for me, I should go back with my family, Ruth clings to her mother-in-law and refuses to leave her. Verse 13 is Naomi saying, "No, my daughters, it's exceedingly bitter for me, for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." They lift up their voice and wept again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And the picture is Ruth really wants to stay with her. So Ruth is staying. Orpah leaves. Verse 15, Naomi says to Ruth, "See, your sister-in-law's gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." Listen to what Ruth says. "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw she was determined to go with her, she said no more. This picture of complete faithfulness is really just kind of something to just kind of take us aback. Like, wait a second. We haven't seen foreigners with this kind of faithfulness, with this kind of loyalty, with this kind of steadfast love towards someone else. They've usually been evil and seeking their own gain and following after their gods. But this person, Ruth, decides, I'm going to follow you. I'm going to serve you until the day we die. And I'm going to follow your God. And he's going to be my God. And we're going to live together and we're going to die together. just a covenant bond is between us, and I will never let go. It's just an amazing statement of faith coming from Ruth that is just a rare sight, especially in the time of the judges. So the two of them return back to the land of Bethlehem. And you can just imagine when they show up, Naomi, without her husband, without her two sons, and with a Moabite, that there's a lot of speaking going on, a lot of gossip, a lot of staring going on, wondering, is this Naomi? Is this the woman who went away with the husband and two sons, and she was going to have it better? And look what's happened to her. And Naomi responds in verse 20, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." This picture of bitterness again. Naomi is a name that means pleasant. It means sweet. And so she says, you got to stop calling me pleasant and sweet. There's nothing about my life that is pleasant and sweet right now, because the Lord has judged me. The Lord has dealt bitterly with me. He has brought me back empty. I went away full, and I have returned empty. And she says, "Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" She's just broken. She recognizes that all this suffering, all this pain is the result of her own sins. And so she comes to these people not mad at them for talking about her, but sad and broken because God has judged her, and she knows she's received curses as a result of the rebellion of her own family and herself. In chapter 2, it starts off telling us that Naomi has a kinsman, a relative of her husband's, who's a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And then it goes into a different kind of side story, just kind of prepares us for what's about to happen. They enter into Bethlehem at the beginning of harvest. And so Ruth is about to go out and start gathering because God has instituted laws in Israel that whenever it's the harvest time, the harvesters are only to gather in the middle portions of the harvest, and they're to leave the edges for those who are poor to come and to gather, so that there is no one who's starving in Israel, and the poor will be taken care of. And so Ruth goes out to gather from the edges of the field, and it just so happens that she comes to the field of a worthy man named Boaz, and it just so happens that Boaz is visiting his field on the day that Ruth is there gleaning from his field. Just coincidence that all of that takes place, right? And so she's there, and she goes to the servants, and she asks, "Can I glean with you?" And they say yes, and she works really hard. She's hardly even taking a break. And then Boaz shows up, and Boaz says to his servants, "The Lord be with you." You can see he's a man that understands God is blessing them. And then they answer, "The Lord bless you." You see that his servants love him as he loves them, that there's this relationship between them. And then Boaz asks, "Who's this woman?" And they respond that this is Ruth, the Moabite, who came back with Naomi. She's been working in this field this whole time, and she's hardly even taken a single break. And Boaz hears about all this hard work that Ruth has done, and all that Ruth has done with Naomi, he has heard about. And so he tells Ruth, "I want you to keep close to all of my young women, and I want you to go with them to the well to get water. And the young men are going to give you water just as they give the young women water. And I've commanded the young men not to touch you, and you're going to be safe with me. Remember, this is the time of the judges." So it's not very often you find a place where you're out of harm's way. So he's blessing her. He's saying, you can stay with us, and we will make sure that you're taken care of. And she falls on her face, and she bows down to the ground and says to him in verse 10, "Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I'm a foreigner?" You see her humility to Boaz. And he responds, "All that you've done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Then she said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants." Notice how Boaz just tells her, "I've heard about your faithfulness to your mother-in-law, who had nobody and had nothing, and that you have decided to return with her and leave and forsake your own family, your own comforts, all those wonderful things that you could have had in order to be a servant to her." And Boaz recognizes this faithfulness, and he knows that that took a lot of guts, and that took a lot of faith in the Lord, and he wants to reward that. And he prays that God will bless Ruth for all the good that she has done. And he doesn't just end there. He goes on to invite Ruth to come to eat with him and his servants. And she does, and she eats all that she can. And at the end of that, she goes back out to work again. And this time, Boaz tells all the servants, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and don't reproach her. Let her have the best of the stuff, and don't be mad at her. And even set aside bundles for her to pick at and to pull out some of the best stuff." So we see Boaz being extremely generous and giving Ruth a ton of food so that she can take it back to Naomi. And that's what she does in verses 17 through 23. She takes it back, and you just picture her walking in with this huge load of food that Boaz has helped her and given her. And Naomi says, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." She recognizes that there's a man who likes you, Ruth. There's something going on here. And she tells him that it's Boaz. And Naomi says, "May he be blessed by the Lord." Notice, Naomi's mind is constantly thinking about the Lord blessing or the Lord cursing. She says, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." She sees herself as dead, and she says, "Blessed be the Lord, who has shown kindness to us." We're dead, essentially. And he's shown us kindness just by providing us with all this food. And Ruth tells Naomi that he invited her to go and glean from his fields. And Naomi says, "Yes, you need to do that, because if you go to another field, you might be assaulted." Verse 22. You might be assaulted. There's, again, a picture. Everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes in the time of Judges. Now, there's no longer a famine, so there is some faithfulness in the land, but there's still a lot of danger here. So she decides to go back, and she's been working in his fields. And then we get to chapter 3, when the mother-in-law has this bright idea. She goes to Ruth and says, "My daughter," verse 1, "should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." And she replies, "All that you say, I will do." Wait a second, what is this about? Naomi's got this scheme in her mind, something that she wants Ruth to do. She wants her to go to the threshing floor where they're threshing out all the grain, and wait and not let herself be known until Boaz is done threshing and eating and drinking, and he goes to lay down. And she wants her to go into his area where he's sleeping and uncover his feet and lay down there. And she says, "He'll tell you what to do." And it's just odd. Like, what is going to happen here? Well, this is a way for a woman to propose to a man. A way for a woman to discreetly propose to a man without him feeling obligated, right? He's not in front of everybody having to explain why not or anything like that. It's just giving him an opportunity to marry her and to redeem her. He is a kinsman. And the kinsmen in Israel, as part of the law, were given an opportunity and were supposed to redeem those who were their relatives who had died. If a brother has a brother who dies and that wife never had children, it's the brother's responsibility to marry the wife, to have children, and those children will receive the portion of the inheritance that belonged to the brother. And so this is maybe a possibility, an opportunity for the kinsman redemption to actually take place. And this is what Ruth and Naomi are asking for Boaz to do. So she goes in, she uncovers his feet, and all of a sudden he wakes up. You can just imagine there's a woman at your feet, and he says, "Who are you?" And she says, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Now, as she says this is supposed to kindle something in our brains. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. You remember Boaz told Ruth, "May the Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward be given to you from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Isn't it interesting how this sounds a whole lot like we studied this morning? Here you have a guy who says, "May God take you under the shelter of his wings." And Ruth comes up to him and says, "Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." She asks him to do the very thing that he was asking God to do. She asks him to spread his wings over her and provide for her and care for her. For God to bless Ruth through Boaz and to marry her. And he says, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first," verse 10, "and that you have not gone after the young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." So he is a worthy man, and she is known to be a worthy woman. He says in verse 12, "It is true that I'm a redeemer, but there's another redeemer nearer than I." So you get the picture that he's going to be this generous, this caring, this tender man who is taking care of her, is going to bring her under his wings. But at the same time, he is a man who seeks to follow the law of God. He recognizes there is another man who has a place before me, and he wants to keep the law. As you look at this and you wonder about this, what's she going to do now? And how is this all going to play out? Well, we see he tells her, "You just stay here until the morning," and we don't get the picture. Anything inappropriate is taking place or anything like that. And he says, "In the morning, don't tell anybody about this." And I will. And he ends up giving her a lot of food, essentially like a dowry, 6 measures of barley. And you can imagine about 60 pounds of barley that she's carrying with her. And she goes back to Naomi, and Naomi says, "How did it go, my daughter?" And you can imagine she says, "Pretty good. We got this heavy load." She takes off the heavy load and lets her know that he has decided to accept the offer. The 6 measures of barley, obviously, give it away. And Naomi responds, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." The picture is from this huge wedding gift that he's excited about this, and that this is overall going to be a good thing. In chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, we see Boaz goes to the gate of the city, and whenever he gets there, he's waiting for this kinsman, redeemer, the closest redeemer, to come, and he gets him to sit here, and he brings all the elders over and has them sit down, and he tells them, Naomi returned, and she doesn't have a husband or sons anymore, and so you're the next in line to buy her land. If you want to buy her land, then you need to say so. And the guy says, "Oh, yeah, I want to buy that land." Land's a huge deal in Israel. It's part of the blessing. "I want to buy that land." And then he says, "Oh, and with the land, you also must redeem Ruth, the Moabite." And he says, "Oh, wait, I can't redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance." And what's really interesting about this is the man is not named. Whoever he is, we don't know. He's called friend in the ESV, but the translation is really, hey, Mr. So-and-so, come over here. He's not named at all, no reference to him, whether good or evil, but he's just not named. And he gives up on this and doesn't take advantage of the opportunity. And so Boaz jumps on the opportunity, says before all the elders, you've seen this. He's handed a sandal to let everybody know that he is able to do this. And he ends up redeeming Naomi and Ruth, and he agrees to marry Ruth. Well, all the elders give blessing to Boaz and Ruth. And this is what they say in verse 11. We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this woman. Now, this blessing is important and significant because Leah and Rachel are responsible for the whole nation, right? The 12 tribes of Israel came from these two women. And Perez is a descendant of Judah who ended up becoming this huge tribe, the biggest tribe of all Israel through Tamar. And it's interesting because Tamar did something scandalous in order to be in this lineage. And so here we have a foreigner Tamar and a foreigner Ruth, who are both going to be playing a role in all this lineage. And the elders recognize that, and they bless this couple and ask for God to bless them. So it's very interesting to see that blessing. Then you get to the final section of the book. In verse 13, we see finally Boaz takes Ruth. She becomes his wife. He went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. But really, that's not what the focus is of this section. Keep reading with me. It says, Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Now Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. Notice how this story goes back to Naomi. It started off really kind of focusing in on Naomi. It brought up Naomi again and again as Ruth is dealing with all of these different things. Even though Ruth is what the book is named after, who the book is named after, it really kind of revolves around Naomi, and it revolves around the Lord and the relationship that Naomi has with the Lord. And what happens here is really interesting that the women go to Naomi and they say to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord. Not blessed be you, Naomi, but blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. The picture is of God blessing Naomi, and now the women of Judah, Bethlehem, are blessing the Lord because of this wonderful act that he has done in showing grace and mercy to Naomi through Ruth and Boaz. Ultimately, they're blessing the Lord because he sees the widow. He sees the childless. He sees the poor. He sees the afflicted, and he cares for them. And this is the nature of God, that he sees the broken, and he wants to mend. He wants to heal them. And he does this, of all things, through Ruth, a Moabite. How unlikely is that? Who the women say is more to her than 7 sons. Just this unlikely redemption story that takes place through Ruth and through Boaz to redeem Naomi, to bring back the pleasantness in her life and take away all of the bitterness that she has experienced by giving her a grandson who will carry on the inheritance that the Lord has promised in blessing to her family. What a way to end this book. So as we look at this book, we probably can see a few things about this book that make it extremely important. As we've studied Judges now, we understand things did not look good in the book of Judges, right? Everything was falling apart. I mean, you look at this whole storyline, and you started in Genesis, and everything fell apart, and then God said, I'm going to do something through you, Abraham, and your descendants. And then we're like, oh yeah, he's going to do something. And he redeems Israel. And we're like, oh yeah, he's going to do something through Israel. And then Israel falls flat in Judges, and we're like, that plan didn't work out. What's God going to do now? And even in the midst of the story of Judges, we get this picture that God has something else in mind, something else in store that he's working on for those who are broken to be redeemed, for them to be healed, and for them to be made full again once they're made empty. Judges ultimately just portrays that failure to obey the law of God, and we wonder, is there any hope for mankind to ever have a relationship with God if they don't obey God's will? Right? Israel was supposed to come into the land, obey the will of God, and spread out throughout all the nations, and everybody obeys the law of God. But that fell apart. What is God going to do? Well, he's going to do something through redemption again. The picture of redemption we saw in Exodus, we see again. That there's going to be a man who is going to come, who is going to provide the redemption that is needed. And he at first shows us Ruth, and then he shows us Boaz. Throughout this story, we get the picture that God doesn't really care if you're foreign or if you're Israelite. God is not prejudiced. God is not partial toward foreigners or toward his people over the foreigners. He wants to redeem everybody. He wants to help everybody. The goal was essentially to take from Israel, to take the whole world, and to bring them near to him again, to bring mankind in again. And now we kind of get a taste that Israel fails miserably. And here we have a faithful foreigner that comes in and finds help along with an Israelite that's broken and decides to return and become faithful. They both find help and salvation through Boaz. But as we look at this, we notice eventually from this line is going to come David, right? That's the whole reason why this book is even in here. Because Ruth is the grandmother, the great-grandmother of David. You see, if Ruth had not decided to cling to Naomi, there wouldn't be a David. If Naomi had not been broken and recognized her sins before God, there might not have been a David. And so all of this story and all of these things that take place show God, through this little bitty thread, bringing about the salvation of his people. He works in this providential way that Ruth just so happens to be in Boaz's field, and Boaz just so happens to be there, and all these different things in God's providence working to provide for all of Israel the redemption that they need, and essentially for all the nations, the redemption that they're looking for. If you go to other texts, you see that Ruth is mentioned in the genealogy in Matthew 1. We saw Ruth as a part of that. If you go to Isaiah 56, you notice God saying this about foreigners in verse 3. Let not the foreigner who has joined himself to the Lord say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people. And let not the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus says the Lord to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than the sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. And the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord and to be his servants, everyone who keeps the Sabbath and does not profane it and holds fast my covenant, these I will bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. There the burnt offering and their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar. For my house shall be called the house of prayer for all peoples. The Lord God who gathers the outcasts of Israel, declares the Lord, I will gather yet others to him, besides those already gathered. You get a picture that God is open and willing to accept everybody into Israel through Jesus and through the salvation that he is creating. If we're going to apply this book, we need to just ask questions. What is my situation? As we look at the different characters, who do I fit? Am I broken? Am I suffering from the sins and the curses of my sin? Then all we need to do is look at Naomi. We can relate to Naomi, understanding that God sees us in our brokenness. And he wants to help us. He wants to take us under his wings. If we feel empty, we feel as though our sins are too much, God sees us and he wants to fill us up and bring us back to the state of blessedness that we long for. She has complete and total humility. She recognizes the Lord in everything she does and glorifies God for all the things that he has done for her. And we see God responds by giving her grace. And this is what he promises to us. If we're outcasts, we can look at Ruth. And we can see that the faithful are always accepted in to God's people. God is willing and able to accept all those who are foreign, who come and pledge allegiance to him and pledge and desire to be in covenant relationship with him. He not only welcomes them, he exalts them. You see, Ruth is in the lineage to the Messiah. Ruth is not just some other Israelite now. She is a major character in the story of redemption. And if you want to see God's love, no matter where you are in this story, all you have to do is look at Boaz. You see his generosity, his willingness to provide for what's needed and bring the dead back to life. And you understand and you can see that this is what God wants to do for all of us. Boaz in so many ways resembles Jesus as he just looks upon the faith of Ruth, has compassion and mercy, and wants to give her everything she needs and provides her and Naomi with everything they could want. And this is very much what our Lord wants to do for us. He extends to us the grace of God. He fulfills the law of God. And he brings about our redemption so that we can live eternally redeemed. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. The word redeem means to buy back. It means to pay off the debts, to clear it all away, so that you can belong once again to the Lord. And this is what Boaz does for Naomi, and this is what Jesus does for us. When we come to him in brokenness, he pays off our debt, he clears away all the sin, and he provides once again the promised blessing and the inheritance that he wants to give us. So it's a beautiful story of redemption, a beautiful story of God's love, and a story that gives us hope in the midst of a time of real evil and disappointment and discouragement. Everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes, except a few. And those few are seen by God, and God saves them and redeems them. Are you a member of that few that are redeemed? If you're not, we want to encourage you and help you in any way we can. Please come as we stand and sing.